I want you to imagine something with me right now. Close your eyes for just a moment if you can. Picture yourself lying in bed tonight, the room dark and quiet, and suddenly a thought creeps into your mind like cold water seeping through a crack. What happens when I die? Where do I go? Will I simply stop existing? Will there be nothing? And with that thought comes a feeling in your chest, doesn't it? A tightness, a flutter of fear that makes your heart beat just a little bit faster. You are not alone in this feeling, my friend, not at all. I am Marcus Aurelius, and I have lain awake on countless nights in military camps, in the palace, on cold stone floors far from home, asking myself this exact same question. I have commanded armies. I have ruled an empire. I have held the lives of millions in my hands. And yet, in the darkness of my own mind, I have felt that same fear you feel. That primal terror of the unknown that waits for every single one of us at the end of this road we call life. But here is what I have learned through years of contemplation, through studying the greatest minds who came before me, through watching men die on battlefields and in their beds, through losing people I loved more than my own breath. What I have learned is this: death is not the monster we have made it out to be. It is not the enemy lurking in the shadows. And the fear you feel, that terrible anxiety that grips you at 3 in the morning when you cannot sleep, that fear is based on a misunderstanding, a confusion about what you really are and what death really means. Today, I am going to share with you the truth about death as the Stoics understood it. Not theories, not wishful thinking, not fairy tales designed to comfort children, but a clear, honest, deeply practical understanding that has the power to completely transform the way you live every single day you have left. Because here is the secret, my friend, the one truth that changes everything. When you truly understand death, when you look at it directly without flinching, without decoration, without lies, you stop being afraid. And when you stop being afraid of death, you stop being afraid of life. You become free in a way most people never experience. You start living with a courage, a clarity, a joy that makes every moment richer and more beautiful than you ever thought possible. I am going to walk with you through this darkness, and I promise you, we will find light on the other side. The question of what happens after death is perhaps the oldest question humanity has ever asked. Our ancestors painted on cave walls, built monuments that reached toward the sky, created elaborate rituals and stories, all attempting to answer this one burning question. And I understand why. The uncertainty of it, the absolute unknowable nature of it, strikes at the very core of our being. We are creatures who crave certainty, who need to understand and predict and control. And death is the one thing that refuses to be controlled. It comes for the rich and the poor alike. It takes the young and the old. It does not negotiate. It does not make exceptions. It simply is. When I was a young man, before I took on the responsibilities of empire, I would lie in my bed and feel my heart beating in my chest. Thump, thump, thump. And I would think, someday this will stop. Someday this rhythm that has played since before I was born, since before I drew my first breath, will simply cease. And what then? The thought terrified me. I would place my hand over my heart and feel that muscle working, pumping blood through my body without my conscious thought, keeping me alive moment by moment. And I felt so fragile, so temporary, like a candle flame that could be snuffed out by the slightest breeze. I imagine you have felt this too. Maybe you have lost someone you loved. Maybe you have had a close call, a moment where death brushed past you and you felt its cold presence. Maybe you are getting older and you can feel your body changing, slowing down, and the reality of your own mortality is becoming harder to ignore. Or maybe you are young and healthy, but you lie awake at night with that existential dread that seems to come from nowhere, that feeling of standing on the edge of an enormous abyss and knowing, absolutely knowing, that someday you will have to step off into that darkness. I know that feeling. I have stood on battlefields watching the light leave men's eyes. I have seen plague sweep through cities, taking children and elders without discrimination. I have held the hand of my own children as they died, felt their grip weaken and then release. Death is not an abstraction to me. It is a companion I have known intimately. And yet, here is what I learned through all of that suffering, through all of that confrontation with mortality. The fear of death is worse than death itself. The anxiety, the dread, the constant background noise of mortality whispering in your ear, this is what steals your life, not death. Death simply ends it. But fear? Fear poisons every moment you have left. Think about it. How many hours have you lost to worrying about death? How many beautiful moments have you only half experienced because somewhere in the back of your mind you were thinking, this will end. I will end. Everyone I love will end. You are at a concert, and instead of losing yourself in the music, you are thinking about how someday you will not be able to hear anything at all. You are holding your child, and instead of feeling the pure joy of that embrace, you are calculating how many more years you might have, wondering who will die first, dreading the inevitable loss. This is the paradox. We waste our lives fearing the loss of life. We are so terrified of dying that we forget to live. We become ghosts, haunting our own existence, already mourning ourselves while we still draw breath. But what if I told you that this fear is based on a fundamental misunderstanding? What if the thing you are most afraid of is not actually what you think it is? Consider this. You are not afraid of being dead. How could you be? Being dead means you will not exist to experience it. There will be no you there to suffer, to feel loss, to experience the absence of anything. You were not afraid for the billions of years before you were born, were you? You did not lie awake in non-existence, dreading the void. The state of being dead is simply returning to that same state of non-being. No, what you fear is not death itself. What you fear is dying the process, the pain, the loss of control. You fear the grief your death will cause others. You fear the incompleteness, the dreams unrealized, the words unsaid. You fear the moment of transition, that final breath, that last second of consciousness before the lights go out. You fear what might come after, if anything comes at all. And more than anything, I think, you fear the meaninglessness. You fear that your life, your struggles, your loves, your achievements, that all of it adds up to nothing. That you are a brief spark in an infinite darkness, signifying nothing, remembered by no one, mattering to no one. You fear that death reveals life to be pointless. This is the real terror, is it not? Not that you will die, but that your life will not have mattered, that you will vanish and the world will continue as if you never existed at all. I have wrestled with this question myself, in the quiet hours of the night when my responsibilities as emperor faded away and I was just a man, alone with his thoughts. What does it mean to live well when death makes everything temporary? What does it mean to matter when we all return to dust? The answer I found might surprise you, because it contradicts everything our survival instincts tell us. The very temporariness of life is what gives it meaning, not in spite of death, but because of it. Imagine for a moment that you had infinite time, that every action could be repeated endlessly, every conversation revisited, every choice remade. What would matter then? What would carry weight? If you could always say, "I'll do it tomorrow," and have 10,000 tomorrows guaranteed, would today ever really matter? It's the deadline that gives urgency to our lives, not in a panicked, anxious way, but in a way that focuses our attention on what truly deserves it. When you know you have limited time with someone you love, you don't waste it on petty arguments. When you know you have limited breaths to take, you stop holding your breath waiting for life to begin. I think about this when I look at my own children. I could spend my time with them worrying about the empire, about what historians will say about my reign, about whether I'm measuring up to the emperors who came before me. Or I could be present, right now, in this moment that will never come again. When my son asks me a question, I can give him my full attention, knowing that he won't be this age tomorrow, that this exact moment of curiosity and trust is happening once and only once in the entire history of the universe. This is what the Stoics meant when they talked about living in accordance with nature. They didn't mean retreating to the woods or rejecting civilization. They meant accepting the fundamental nature of existence itself, that everything is temporary, that change is the only constant, that we are part of something much larger than ourselves. You see, we make ourselves miserable trying to hold on to things that were never meant to be permanent. We rage against aging, as if we could somehow negotiate with time. We mourn the passing of youth as if it's been stolen from us, when in fact it was always going to pass. It's like being angry at the waves for reaching the shore, or cursing winter for following autumn. But when you accept impermanence, something shifts. You stop clinging so desperately to things and start appreciating them while they're here. The flower in your garden becomes more beautiful, not less, because you know it will wilt. The friendship becomes more precious, because you know neither of you will live forever. Even pain becomes more bearable when you remember it too shall pass. I'm not saying this acceptance comes easily. I'm not saying I've mastered it. There are still mornings when I wake up and feel the weight of everything I cannot control, everything I cannot fix, everyone I cannot save. The soldier who dies in battle despite my orders, the plague that spreads despite our best efforts, the corruption that persists despite the laws I enact. But here's what I've learned. You can either be tortured by the gap between how things are and how you wish they were, or you can work with what is actually in front of you. You can spend your life mourning an imaginary perfect world, or you can find meaning in improving this imperfect one action at a time. And that's where duty comes in. Not duty as a burden or obligation that crushes your spirit, but duty as a way of contributing to something beyond yourself. When I act as emperor, I'm not trying to achieve immortality through my legacy. I'm trying to do what needs doing, right now, because I happen to be in a position to do it. This changes everything about how you approach your own life. You stop asking, "What's in this for me?" and start asking, "What does this moment require of me?" The question shifts from personal gain to present necessity. I see this in the faces of the soldiers on the northern frontier. The ones who survive longest, not just physically, but with their humanity intact, aren't the ones fighting for glory or plunder. They're the ones who understand their role in something larger. They protect the man beside them. They hold the line because that's what the moment demands. They don't need Rome to remember their names. They need to know they did what was theirs to do. And here's what surprises people. This approach doesn't make you passive or resigned. It makes you more effective. When you're not distracted by worrying whether history will remember you, whether you're getting enough credit, whether your suffering has some cosmic meaning, you can focus entirely on the task in front of you. The Stoics had a concept they called times oikeiosis, times the process of recognizing what's properly yours, not in the sense of ownership, but in the sense of appropriate action. What belongs to this moment? What's mine to do right now, given who I am and where I stand? For me, in this moment, it's being emperor, not because I'm special, but because circumstances placed me here. For you, it might be being a parent to a difficult child, or finishing a project no one will praise, or showing patience with someone who frustrates you. The specifics don't matter. What matters is recognizing, this is what life is asking of me right now. You don't get to choose all your duties. I didn't choose to be born into the imperial family. I didn't choose these endless wars on the frontier. The plague that swept through Rome, I didn't choose that either. But I can choose how I meet what I've been given. I can choose to see it not as cosmic injustice, but as material to work with. Think of it like a craftsman receiving whatever materials happen to arrive at his workshop. One day, he gets good wood, straight and strong. Another day, he gets twisted, knotted pieces full of defects. Does he rage at the wood? Does he quit because the universe should have sent him better materials? No. He studies what he's been given and asks, "What can I make with this?" Your life is the same. You receive circumstances, some good, some terrible, most somewhere in between. Your job isn't to wish you'd received different circumstances. Your job is to work with what's actually here, to find the appropriate response to this moment with these people, in this situation. And when you do this, when you stop fighting reality and start working with it, something unexpected happens. The burden becomes lighter. Not because the circumstances change, but because you've stopped adding the extra weight of resentment and resistance. You're no longer carrying the situation plus your anger about the situation, just the situation itself. Which, it turns out, is almost always more manageable than you thought. This is why the Stoics talked so much about acceptance. Not acceptance as passive surrender, but acceptance as clear-eyed recognition of what is, followed by appropriate action. I can't change that Rome has enemies on every border. I can't change that resources are limited, that people are often foolish, that my own body is failing, but I can work with all of that. I can make decisions based on reality rather than on how I wish reality were. The freedom in this is extraordinary. When you stop needing your life to mean something grand, every moment becomes available for meaning. I watched a musician friend struggle with this recently. She'd built her entire identity around becoming famous, the record deals, the sold-out shows, the recognition. For 20 years, every song she wrote was auditioned in her mind before an imaginary crowd of admirers. Every melody was tested against the question, "Will this make me matter?" Then something shifted. I don't know exactly what, maybe exhaustion, maybe wisdom. She started writing music just for the process itself, not for an album, not for approval. Just because on Tuesday afternoon there was a melody in her head that wanted to exist. The quality of her work transformed completely, not because she was trying to make it better, but because she'd stopped trying to make it prove something. This is the fourth practice. Create without attachment to outcome. Do the thing because doing it is the thing. We've been taught the opposite, of course. We've been taught that purpose gives meaning to action, that you paint the painting to have painted something, write the book to have written it, build the business to achieve success. The action is just the tedious bridge to the destination. But watch a child play. They're not playing to have played. They're not building the block tower for the satisfaction of having built it. The building times is times the satisfaction. The doing is the point. We had that once. Then we were taught to be productive, to be results-oriented, to keep our eyes on the prize, and we lost something essential in the translation. We lost the ability to be fully present in the action itself. I notice this in my own work. When I'm writing with my attention on how the finished piece will be received, every sentence is torture. I'm constantly editing before I've even created, judging before I've allowed anything to exist. But when I'm writing simply to see what wants to be said, when I'm curious about the next word rather than worried about the final product, the work flows. Time disappears. This is what the old texts mean by action without action. Not that you do nothing, but that you do everything without the burden of needing it to become something other than what it is. The carpenter who loves carpentry doesn't need the table to make him a master. He's already complete in the act of planing the wood, feeling how the grain responds to the blade, adjusting pressure and angle. The table that emerges is almost secondary, a natural result, rather than a goal achieved. Can you feel how different that is? How much lighter? Most of us are carrying this invisible weight, the outcome. We're haunted by the future version of what we're doing right now. We can't be here because we're already there, anxious about whether there will satisfy us. But there never satisfies you. Have you noticed? You get there, wherever there is, and within moments, within hours at most, you're already looking at the next there. The promotion doesn't complete you. The published book doesn't finally prove you're a real writer. The relationship doesn't solve the fundamental loneliness. Nothing external ever does what you think it will do. So, what's left? Just this. Just the actual experience of being alive right now, doing whatever you're doing, without needing it to transport you to some better, more meaningful version of existence. Just this. Which sounds small when I say it like that, but it's not small at all. It's the only thing that's real. Everything else is a story you're telling yourself about what this moment means, or will mean, or should mean. The fifth practice follows naturally. Embrace ordinariness. Not as a consolation prize, not as what you settle for when you can't have extraordinary, but as the texture of an actual life, which is mostly ordinary moments, one after another, until there are no more. The coffee that tastes good on a Wednesday morning, the walk to your car in the rain, the conversation with a colleague that surprises you with its honesty, the book you're reading before bed, the sound of your own breathing when you wake up before the alarm. These aren't the footnotes to your real life. They are your real life. And here's what makes this understanding so powerful. When you stop waiting for your life to become extraordinary, you stop living in constant disappointment. You stop measuring every day against some imagined better version of itself. You stop feeling like you're failing because Monday wasn't a revelation, and Tuesday wasn't a breakthrough, and Wednesday was just Wednesday. Most people spend their entire lives in a state of low-grade disappointment because they're comparing their actual existence to some highlight reel they've constructed in their minds. They think happiness is supposed to feel like perpetual excitement, that love is supposed to feel like the first kiss forever, that meaningful work is supposed to feel like a TED Talk every morning. And when life doesn't deliver that which is always, because life can't deliver, that they assume something's wrong with their city, their body, their choices. But nothing's missing. You're not broken. Your life isn't defective. This is just what life actually feels like when you're living it instead of imagining it. And the cruel irony? The thing that actually creates those moments of joy, connection, and meaning that people are chasing? It's presence. It's being here, in this unremarkable moment, without wishing it were different. It's meeting your ordinary life with attention instead of judgment. The best meal you've ever had wasn't just about the food. It was about being present enough to taste it. The best conversation wasn't scripted, it emerged because you were actually listening instead of performing. The moment you felt most alive wasn't when everything was perfect. It was when you stopped requiring perfection and just. This is what I mean when I say you need to reconcile with the ordinary. I mean you need to stop treating most of your life like it doesn't count, like it's just the waiting room before the real thing starts. Because there is no real thing. There's just this. This moment, this breath, this ordinary Tuesday afternoon that you'll never get back. And when you can meet that truth without despair, something shifts. Not into constant bliss, let's be clear about that, but into something more sustainable than bliss. Something like groundedness, realness, a sense that you're actually inhabiting your life instead of hovering above it, critiquing it, wishing it were different. You stop needing everything to mean something. You stop needing every day to justify itself. You stop asking, is this all there is? Because you realize that question itself is the problem. It's the question of someone who's still convinced that life happens somewhere else, to other people, in some other form. You begin to see that the life you're living times is times the life, not the rehearsal, not the waiting room, the actual thing. And this shift, this quiet, undramatic shift, changes everything. Because now, when you sit with your coffee in the morning, you're not mentally already at work. You're not rehearsing conversations or anticipating problems. You're just there, with the warmth of the cup in your hands, watching the steam rise, feeling the first sip wake up your senses. And that moment, that tiny, unremarkable moment, becomes full, not because anything special happened, but because you were actually in it. This is what they don't tell you about peace. It's not transcendent. It's not a mountaintop experience or a revelation that knocks you off your feet. Peace is the absence of the need for anything to be different. It's the moment you stop fighting with reality and just let it be what it is. I see people treat life like a problem that needs solving. Like if they could just get the variables right, the right job, the right relationship, the right body, the right amount of money, then the equation would balance and they'd finally feel okay. But life isn't an equation. It's not a puzzle with a solution. It's a river, and you're in it. And the only real choice you have is whether you're going to swim against the current or let it carry you. Most people spend their whole lives swimming upstream, exhausted, convinced that if they just push harder, they'll get to some magical place where the water stops moving. But the water never stops. That's not a flaw in the system, that's the system. When you stop resisting, something strange happens. The river doesn't drown you, it holds you. You realize you were never fighting the water, you were fighting your own fear of it. And this is where acceptance becomes radical. Because acceptance doesn't mean you stop trying. It doesn't mean you abandon your goals or stop caring about outcomes. It means you stop making your peace conditional on those outcomes. You stop telling yourself, "I'll be happy when," because you realize that happiness was never waiting for you at the finish line. It was available the whole time, right here, in the middle of the mess. I've watched people achieve everything they thought they wanted and still feel empty. I've also watched people lose everything and find a kind of freedom they didn't know existed. The difference wasn't in what they had, it was in what they'd let go of. What they let go of was the belief that their worth was tied to their accomplishments, that their value was something they had to earn, that peace was a reward for getting life right. You don't get life right, you just live it. And when you finally understand that, when you really let it sink in, you stop performing. You stop trying to impress people who aren't paying attention. You stop curating your life for an audience that doesn't exist. You stop waiting for permission to be who you are. You just... And in that being, in that simple, undefended presence, you find something you'd been searching for your whole life. The feeling that you're enough. Not because you did something or became someone, just because you're here, just because you exist. This is the freedom no one talks about. The freedom that doesn't come from having more choices, but from needing fewer of them. The freedom that doesn't come from controlling your life, but from trusting it. The slave spends his life acquiring chains he mistakes for jewelry. The free person spends his life removing them. I spent decades believing my worth was measured by what I accomplished. Every morning, I woke up with a list of things that needed to be done, problems that needed solving, battles that needed winning. And every night, no matter how much I had achieved, the list had only grown longer. The empire needed defending, the people needed leading, my family needed providing for. And underneath all of that, there was this relentless voice saying, "You need to be more, do more, prove more." I never questioned it. I thought that's what responsibility meant, that's what strength looked like. But here's what I've learned after all these years, after all these campaigns, after watching empires rise and fall within my own mind. That voice wasn't wisdom. It was fear wearing wisdom's mask. The voice that says, "You're not enough unless you achieve more," that's not ambition, that's terror of irrelevance. The voice that says you must control everything, that's not leadership, that's terror of chaos. The voice that says rest is weakness, that's not discipline, that's terror of your own humanity. And when you finally recognize fear for what it is, when you stop obeying it, stop feeding it, stop mistaking it for truth, something extraordinary happens. You realize you were already enough before you did anything to prove it. You realize your value doesn't come from what you accomplish, but from what you are, a conscious being, a fragment of the universe that somehow learned to reflect on itself. That alone is miraculous. That alone is sufficient. The tree doesn't become more tree-like by producing more fruit. It simply produces fruit because that's its nature. And when the season changes, when the fruit falls away, the tree doesn't stop being a tree. It simply stands, rooted, present, waiting for the next season. You are that tree. Your worth isn't determined by your productivity. Your value doesn't fluctuate with your achievements. You are valuable because you exist, because you are part of this strange, cosmic unfolding, because consciousness itself is the universe's greatest miracle, and you are that miracle, breathing, thinking, feeling right now. When you truly grasp this, not intellectually, but in your bones, the whole game changes. You stop performing for approval. You stop hustling for worthiness. You stop treating your life like an audition for some future moment when you'll finally be enough. You just live, fully, presently, without the constant background anxiety that you're not doing it right. This doesn't mean you stop working. It doesn't mean you become passive or complacent, but the quality of your work changes. The motivation shifts. You no longer work to escape inadequacy. You work because creation is joyful, because contribution feels meaningful, because growth is natural to living things. You no longer need success to validate you. You no longer fear failure because failure can't diminish what you truly are. And in that space between striving and surrendering, between doing and being, you find what every philosophy promises, but so few deliver. Peace. Not as something you achieve, not as a reward for good behavior or right thinking, but as your natural state once you stop fighting against reality. The peace that comes from knowing you're exactly where you need to be, even when where you are is difficult. The peace that comes from trusting that life is unfolding as it must, even when you can't see the pattern. The peace that comes from accepting that you are both insignificant and infinite, a tiny speck in an incomprehensible cosmos, and also the cosmos itself, experiencing its own existence through your particular eyes. This is what the Stoics tried to teach. This is what every wisdom tradition points toward, using different words, different maps, but describing the same territory. The realization that you are already home. You were never lost. You were never broken. You were never insufficient. You were just confused, hypnotized by stories, conditioned to search outside yourself for what was always within. And what were those stories telling you? That happiness comes times after asterisk, after the promotion, after the wedding, after the house, after the kids grow up, after retirement, always after, always tomorrow, always somewhere else. But I learned to ask, what if their times is times no after? What if this right here, right now, is it? Not in a depressing way, in a liberating way. Because when you stop waiting for life to begin, it already has. You see, we've been trained to treat the present moment like a waiting room, like it's just the space between where we were and where we're going. We sit here anxiously, checking our watch, wondering when we'll be called. When the times, real times, life will start. But the present isn't a waiting room. It's the entire hospital. It's the whole building. It's everything. Every breath you've ever taken has been in the present. Every meal you've enjoyed, every sunset you've watched, every person you've loved, every laugh, every tear. Every moment of peace you've ever felt, it all happened times here, asterisk, in this moment, this eternal now. And yet we treat it like it's not enough. I used to do this too. I'd be having dinner with my family, but my mind would be in tomorrow's Senate meeting. I'd be walking through the gardens, but my thoughts would be stuck in last week's argument. I was physically present, but mentally absent, a ghost in my own life. Until one day I realized, I'm trading the only thing I actually have this moment for things that don't even exist. memories that can't be changed, futures that might never come. What kind of exchange is that? So, I started training myself differently, not through some mystical practice, just simple attention. When I was eating, I ate. When I was walking, I walked. When someone was speaking to me, I actually listened, not just waited for my turn to talk. And slowly, life became richer, fuller. Because here's what I discovered. The present moment, when you actually inhabit it, contains everything you need. Not everything you want, but everything you need. The breath in your lungs, the ground beneath your feet, the sky above your head, the capacity to think, to feel, to choose. It's all here. It's always been here. And all the things we think we're missing? Most of them are just stories too. We think we need more money. But what we actually need is the feeling we believe money will give us. Security, freedom, respect. And here's the secret: those feelings don't actually come from money. They come from how we interpret our circumstances. I've seen beggars with more peace than kings. I've seen slaves with more inner freedom than emperors. Because those qualities aren't granted by external conditions. They're chosen in the present moment. You think you need the perfect relationship, but what you actually need is to feel loved, accepted, understood, and you can give those things to yourself right now. You can accept yourself. You can understand yourself. You can treat yourself with the kindness you're waiting for someone else to provide. Does this mean you shouldn't pursue anything? That you shouldn't have goals or dreams? No. It means you pursue them from fullness, not from lack. You build from the foundation of enough, not from the anxiety of not enough. There's a difference between creating because you feel empty and creating because you feel alive. Between achieving because you hate yourself and achieving because you love the process. Between acquiring because you're afraid and acquiring because you're generous. The present moment doesn't reject the future, it's just not hostage to it. And that changes everything. Because when you're not desperate for tomorrow, you make better decisions. When you're not running from yesterday, you stop repeating the same patterns. When you're actually here, you see things clearly. You respond instead of react. This is what I mean by living from your center. Your center isn't somewhere you have to get to. It's where you already are when you stop moving, when you stop seeking, when you stop performing. It's not a feeling. It's not a state. It's not an achievement. It's the awareness underneath all of that, the space in which everything happens, the you that was there when you were 5 years old and will be there when you're 95, the unchanging witness to all the changing forms. You don't have to find it, you just have to stop overlooking it. And here's what makes this profound. Once you recognize yourself as awareness, suffering doesn't disappear, but your relationship to it transforms completely. The pain is still there. The grief, the frustration, the fear, they still arise. But now there's space around them. Now there's a recognition that you are the sky, not the weather passing through it. I once sat with a woman whose son had died. The grief was overwhelming, total, all-consuming. And in our conversation, something shifted. Not that the grief lessened, it didn't. But she recognized that even in the midst of this unbearable pain, there was something in her that was simply observing, aware, still. She said something I'll never forget. The grief is here, and I am here with the grief. And somehow, impossibly, that makes all the difference. That's it. That's the shift. You're not trying to transcend your humanity. You're not trying to rise above your emotions or become some detached, unfeeling sage. You're simply recognizing the dimension of yourself that has always been free, even in the midst of bondage. The dimension that was never lost, even when you felt most lost. The dimension that was never broken, even when you felt most shattered. This is what all the great teachings point to. Different words, different traditions, different cultural contexts, but the same essential recognition. The Buddhists call it your Buddha nature. The mystics call it the ground of being. The poets call it the eternal witness. I call it the only true home you've ever had. And the beautiful irony, you've never left it. Not for a single moment. Every seeking, every searching, every desperate attempt to find yourself, it was awareness seeking itself. Consciousness, trying to know itself as consciousness. The I trying to see itself. You can't find what you've never lost. You can only recognize what has always been here. So what do you do with this? How do you live from this understanding? Not by adding more practices, more techniques, more methods, but by subtraction, by letting go of everything you think you need to become. Every morning, before you reach for your phone, before you step into the roles and responsibilities waiting for you, pause, just for a moment, and notice what's here before the story starts. Not what you're thinking about, not what you're planning or remembering, just the simple fact of being aware. During the day, when stress arises, when conflict emerges, when that familiar anxiety starts tightening in your chest, pause again. Not to fix it, not to change it, but to recognize the dimension of yourself that is untouched by it. The awareness that holds the anxiety without being anxious. The consciousness that witnesses the stress without being stressed. This isn't spiritual bypassing. This isn't pretending everything's fine when it's not. This is recognizing that you are larger than any state that moves through you. You contain your experiences. Your experiences don't contain you. And from that recognition, real transformation becomes possible. Not the transformation of trying to become someone better, but the transformation that happens when you stop pretending to be someone smaller than you are. Because here's what I discovered through all those years of observation and reflection. The reason we suffer isn't because difficult things happen to us. It's because we've built an entire identity around avoiding difficulty, around maintaining comfort, around protecting something that never needed protection in the first place. Think about it. Every anxiety you've ever felt about the future, what is it really? It's the imagined discomfort of your ego, your constructed self, encountering something it can't control. Every regret about the past is the same mechanism running backward. You're mourning the version of yourself you thought you were supposed to become, the life you thought you were supposed to live. But who decided that? Who wrote that script? I'll tell you who. The same voice that tells you you're not enough, the same narrative that insists happiness is always just one more achievement away, the same story that whispers you're fundamentally flawed and need to be fixed. And we believe it. We believe it so completely that we spend our entire lives trying to edit ourselves into someone more acceptable. We curate our personalities like museum exhibits. We rehearse our spontaneity. We work tirelessly to become the person we think we should be, never noticing that the effort itself is what's exhausting us. I watched senators do this. Brilliant people who'd forgotten how to simply be themselves. They'd speak in calculated phrases, laugh at predetermined moments, express emotions they thought were expected. And the tragedy wasn't that they were being deceptive. It's that they'd done it for so long, they'd forgotten there was anyone underneath the performance. But you can't maintain a performance forever. Eventually, something cracks. Maybe it's a crisis, maybe it's exhaustion, maybe it's just a quiet moment where the mask slips and you suddenly remember what your actual face feels like. Those moments terrify us because we think they're breakdowns, but they're not. They're breakups, breaking up with the false version of yourself you've been maintaining. And yes, it feels like dying, because in a sense, it is. The constructed self is dissolving. The story is ending. But here's what they don't tell you. On the other side of that dissolution is something you've been searching for your entire life. Not peace in the sense of comfortable tranquility, but peace in the sense of complete permission to exist exactly as you are. Not as you should be, not as you could be, not as you'll be once you fix yourself, as you are. Right now, with all your contradictions, your uncertainties, your beautiful, messy humanity. This is what I mean when I talk about nature, not the romantic idea of nature, trees and sunsets and noble savages. I mean the fundamental nature of what you actually are beneath all the layers of interpretation. You are the awareness in which your entire life unfolds. You are the space in which experiences arise and pass. You are the constant witness of the infinite variations of existence, and that fundamental nature has never been broken. It's never been insufficient. It's never needed improvement. Every spiritual practice, every philosophy, every system of self-help is ultimately pointing you back to this. Not to give you something you don't have, but to remove the obscurations that prevent you from recognizing what's already present. It's like you're standing in sunlight, wearing layers and layers of heavy clothing, sweating and suffering, searching desperately for warmth. And someone comes along and suggests, "What if you just removed the layers?" And you respond, "But I've invested so much in these clothes. They define me. Without them, who would I be? Without them, you'd be free."